Well, hey y'all, how y'all doing? Welcome to another segment of Red, White, and Food with Flag 7. I'm Flag 7. How y'all doing? It is dreary and rainy and nasty here, so we're going to be talking today beverage of choice, BOC. And if you watched the videos before, you know we talk about three things on this channel. Number one, we talk about our veterans and our first responders, our men and women in uniform. Second thing we talk about is food. And we've got some segments coming up. Steak au poivre is coming up. I know, it's coming up any minute. Fancy word for pepper steak, but it's awesome. And then BOC, beverage of choice, whatever that may be for y'all. Could be water, milk, tea, sweet tea, evaporated milk, milk in a carton, alcohol, adult beverage. But we're going to talk about an adult beverage today. So I've been inundated, that there's a fancy word for overwhelmed, with cards, letters, comments, talking about what is a whiskey and what's a bourbon. And wait a second, my producer's talking to me, which is my dog, Xander. Yes, Xander, what do you got? We haven't received any cards and letters? No. Do we get any comments? No, we haven't gotten any comments. What? You think you've got the COVID cooties and you're all depressed now? Okay, now I got a depressed dog, but apparently we haven't gotten any comments, so y'all have to hit that subscribe button on the bottom right if you like what you're seeing. But we're going to talk today about bourbons and a little bit about the difference between bourbon and whiskey, right? And you may say, I can't figure it out. Now, let's start with something interesting. Did you know that all bourbon is a whiskey, but not all whiskey is a bourbon? Well, Greg, that makes about as much sense as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. What are you talking about? That's crazy. Yeah, it's kind of nuts. So let's talk a little bit about what are the differences and what classifies a bourbon. Now, you may also say, Greg, I don't care. So just fast forward. Because you may say, I like something or I don't like it. I don't care where it comes from. Y'all, go ahead. Whatever works for you. But if you do want to know just a couple things that distinguishes bourbon between whiskey, and then watch me sample something and give you a recommendation, and y'all need to stay by. You staying? Okay, here we go. So, watch this. Y'all heard of Irish whiskey? How about Scotch whiskey or American whiskey? Those can be made almost anywhere, but to be called a bourbon, it has to be made where? Y'all got it. USA. You cannot call yourself a bourbon if you're not made in the United States. You also know that a bourbon has to be 51% corn. Now, you might be sampling something and you're not, I don't taste no corn in here. What are you talking about? But to get that bourbon label, it's got to be 51%. It's got to be aged in oak barrels. Now, watch this. So does whiskey. The difference between the bourbon and the whiskey is bourbon has to be in a charred oak barrel, right? Otherwise, it can't be a bourbon, right? Other interesting facts about bourbon in here. There are no added preservatives. There's no added coloring. There's no outside additives that go in there. Whatever color you see is how that is distilled and how it's aged. There's nothing else that's in there. It can't be less than 80% proof. And those are just some of the things that differentiates a bourbon for a whiskey. And again, you may say, that's great. I just want to try something. What do you say we do that? Okay, let's try one. So I am not a bourbon expert. I know what I like. So don't write in if you're going to write in and tell me, no, this one's better than that one. Whatever y'all like, I'm just picking one out. Now, some of the finest bourbon is made in a state, it's even a commonwealth, in the United States. Now I'm going to ask my buddy Big Jim. He's sitting right over there, Big Jim, my buddy from Connecticut. He said, Jim, where is a state that makes awesome bourbon? Bourbon can be made anywhere, but where is it? Let's see, a hint. You might see something on me somewhere that, yes sir, raise your hand, Jim, there you go. Kentucky. And do y'all know that there's something called a Bourbon Trail in Kentucky? And what does that mean? It means that you can start in Louisville, and by the way, it's not Louisville, it's Louisville, all the way down to Lexington, where I'm from, or you go to Lexington all the way up, doesn't matter. There are a whole bunch of them. They're distilleries. All kinds of bourbons that you can go taste. Make sure they're open. Some have restrictions right now with the COVID. The COVID's on. okay? But you can sample all those things. Now, you need you one of those designated drivers, or get you a John Deere, or take a horse, or something or other, because you don't want to be sampling all that bourbon and driving from one end to another. One of the bourbons that you can sample there that I'm going to do today, in fact, I'm just going to take a little, talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Ooh-wee, ooh, yes sir, yes ma'am, is Bulleit Bourbon. Now a little bit about Bulleit Bourbon. So it is unique in the sense that it's got the highest rye content of almost any bourbon, rye mash. So it's got a very unique flavor. Another thing that separates Bulleit Bourbon from some other ones, it uses limestone water from Kentucky that is filtered. So it gives it a very unique taste in there. It's relatively new with their own distillery. It actually, Augustus Bulleit, believe it or not, back in the 1830s, the one that came up with this concoction with that high rye and lower corn. But again, it's still classified as a bourbon. And I love this dude. Watch this. This guy went plumb crazy around the 1860s, and he just packed up all his bourbon, got into a boat, and went him down to New Orleans. Who does not want to just, in this day and age, grab a bunch of bourbon, get into a boat, and go down to New Orleans? I'm all over that like white on rice. That's just crazy. And he took off, and then it got relaunched a little bit later. But it's very unique with that limestone filter, the higher rye taste to it. And so it's got a new recipe, a great new distillery that's out there. Kind of some interesting things also. If you look right quick on this bill of bourbon, you might say, Greg, that label is a little cockeyed. And yeah, it is. It is. They did that on purpose. I don't know why. I was researching it. I think because after you have a couple bourbons, you might try to figure out to read the label in there. But it is a family business. And it's an awesome bourbon. And also, folks, this is what I call made for the masses. And what do I mean by that? It means it's affordable. It's not one of those $200 things. It's not a really cheap. It's something in between that's made for the average Joe or plain Jane to just try a bourbon. It's one of my favorites. There are all kinds of great ones that are out there. But those are some things that differentiate that. And you can see that on the Bourbon Trail when you go down there. So one of the things that I like, it's got kind of a peppery taste to it. And it's got that high rye flavor, so it lingers a little bit. It's not that deep, rich bourbon taste. And you can even look at the color that's on there. In fact, this glass says Lexington. Y'all see that? Okay. And it lingers on the palate a little bit more. And you can find it in any bar. You can find it in any kind of liquor store. So I suggest y'all try this. It's really great with all different types of meals. But it's affordable, and it is kind of unique from a lot of the different bourbons. And I like the name Bulleit. I think it's just kind of cool. Now, when you're buying this, watch, because they do make a rye. It's not a bourbon. So when y'all go to the store, make sure you're picking out the bourbon. Or if you like the rye, you go ahead and do that. But either way, it is an awesome beverage of choice. Y'all need to try it, and we're going to do different bourbons for you going all along. Ending the segment, y'all know that on my left wrist, I always wear a memorial bracelet for our fallen first responders or our veterans. And today is a very close one for me. I'm wearing a memorial bracelet for Jacob Hancher. He was badge number 374 with the Myrtle Beach Police Department. And I say close for me because my son's a Myrtle Beach police officer, and he served with Jacob. And sadly, this fine young gentleman, what we call end of watch, was tragically killed. He was shot responding to a domestic call. Very young gentleman. But in reading about him and learning from my son Grant down there in Myrtle Beach, this guy was dedicated to what he did. He wanted to be a police officer his whole life and help people. And if any fault he had that I've seen and I've heard is this guy smiled too much. This guy was just happy everything he did. In fact, before he got signed up as a law enforcement officer, sworn in, he spent 4 years as a community resource officer. And that's kind of doing work that most of the sworn officers don't want to do, because he wanted to learn. He wanted to understand the radio calls. He wanted to be part of that brotherhood and sisterhood. And so he's tragically gone on October 3rd of 2020. And my thoughts are with him and his family and for everybody that's out there putting a uniform on. So I hope you enjoyed our beverage of choice about bourbons, a little bit about the whiskey back and forth, learning a little bit about our fallen first responder badge number 374, Jacob Hancher. Y'all be safe and well and stay out of trouble out there. We'll see you. Hit that subscribe button. Bye-bye.